The former speaker utilized 8 minutes branding Kash Patel as incompetent. She remained unaware that he had devoted the weekend to retrieving 14 cartons of proof her own panel had attempted to vanish. As he reviewed the third point, she commenced a phrase she proved unable to conclude. The specific term she choked back was corruption. The audio equipment captured the sound regardless. She referred to him as a partisan operative wearing a police disguise. He was indeed sporting the attire. The outfit featured compartments, and those compartments were stuffed with items she assumed she had incinerated. Hit that approval icon because you're about to witness the federal law enforcement chief read 5 pieces of salvaged proof, evidence that was erased, hidden, and buried, presented to the most influential woman in American legislative history on live broadcast with zero refuge and no incinerator large enough to erase it. Director Patel, I have operated within this legislature for 37 years. I have collaborated with 7 law enforcement chiefs, including Robert Mueller, James Comey, Andrew McCabe, and Christopher Wray. The representative hesitated after every moniker, not to catch her breath, but to add gravity. Each individual represented a stone in a barrier separating Patel from the agency he commanded. I have witnessed experts guide that organization, individuals who comprehended that the Bureau answers to the Constitution, not a chief executive. She pivoted toward Patel. It was their initial visual connection. You do not belong in their ranks. It was July 9, 2025, inside room 226 of the Dirksen Senate Office Building during a Senate Judiciary Committee oversight session concerning the Bureau. The Speaker had been summoned as a testifier regarding her January 6th select panel documents, the exact documents the Bureau was currently examining and discovering omissions within. Patel provided testimony as the Bureau chief, and the Speaker had concluded before the audio was active that the optimal strategy was an offensive termination. She rested in a cream-colored outfit with pearl jewelry, maintaining the stance of 37 years of authority. Behind her, which was uncommon for a legislative testifier and noticeable to any observant individual, rested an attorney rather than a legislative advisor, specifically a criminal defense lawyer from Williams and Connolly, the practice that defends individuals anticipating the requirement for defense. The presence of the lawyer communicated everything her voice would spend the subsequent 8 minutes disputing. You are a partisan agent wearing a police disguise, she went on. You received confirmation solely because lawmakers feared your superior, not because they relied on your discernment. The reality that you occupy Robert Mueller's position serves as a disrespect to every investigator who has ever worn a shield. She was not complete. The representative never concluded after a single attack. You authored a publication for Youth's Director, a youth publication titled The Plot Against the King, that reveals everything I require to understand regarding how you view the executive branch and how you perceive yourself. Not as a civic employee, but as a flatterer, an individual who drafts fables regarding his sponsor and labels it national pride. She leaned backward and fixed her spectacles. The movement that communicated, I am finished. It is your opportunity. Best of fortune. At the neighboring desk, Kash Patel remained motionless. He wore a dark outfit. He lacked a necktie, a remnant from his public defender era in Miami-Dade, where neckties belonged to prosecutors and defenders donned whatever sustained them throughout a 14-hour shift. Before him lay a solitary dark portfolio without tags, the precise depth of 5 evidentiary documents and nothing more. It was not the quietness of a person taking a hit. It was the quietness of an individual who had devoted years inside legal chambers where the state attorneys were more boisterous and superiorly financed. And the singular edge a state defender possessed was tolerance, the capacity to remain motionless while a louder individual argued their stance and subsequently rise and dismantle it with facts. He paused for 3 seconds after the representative concluded. Next, he unsealed the dark portfolio, Representative Pelosi. His tone was the Bureau presentation tone the delivery agents utilize when displaying facts to a chief prior to a strike. He used brief statements with zero fluff. Every single word was chosen in the manner a marksman picks a location. I appreciate you for the curriculum vitae, 7 chiefs in 37 years. That is incredibly notable. He glanced toward the portfolio. I have served as chief for 5 months, yet I have been conducting investigations for an extended duration, and throughout those 5 months, my investigators have retrieved some intriguing materials. He glanced toward her, materials you assumed had been eliminated. He flipped to the initial sheet. Allow me to present what the Bureau uncovered. Point number 1. Patel recited the title in the manner a legal assistant recites an artifact identifier, monotonous and administrative. It was the spoken parallel of marking a paper as acquired. Bureau Analytical Economic Assessment, a comparison of the representative's family investment actions alongside the legislative session schedule. The time frame spans January 2019 to December 2024. He glanced at the panel rather than at the speaker, looking at the lawmakers who possess the authority to compel testimony and would have to determine the appropriate response to what followed. Our analytical bookkeepers pinpointed 47 distinct investments executed by the family, predominantly via Paul Pelosi's enterprise, financial leasing services, where the purchase or sale happened within 14 days of a panel decision, chamber vote, or administrative declaration directly impacting the exchanged asset. He took a breath. 47 connected investments across a 5-year span. He flipped a sheet. Allow me to provide you with the key points. In June 2021, Paul Pelosi acquired between $1 million and $5 million in NVIDIA purchasing options. Several weeks later, the CHIPS and Science Act, a $280 billion microchip funding measure, progressed to the legislative floor. Representative Pelosi, acting as Speaker, managed the floor itinerary. She determined the exact moment the measure would face a vote. Her spouse purchased the derivatives prior to the voting process. He proceeded with an unaltered tone. In July 2024, Paul Pelosi divested 2,000 units of Visa. A couple of months later, in September 2024, the Justice Department initiated an anti-monopoly legal action against Visa regarding domination of the debit transactions sector. The equity value plummeted. The family had already withdrawn 2 months prior to the legal action becoming common knowledge. He flipped an additional sheet. Apple, Alphabet, Microsoft, Amazon, and CrowdStrike. Every investment was finalized within days of administrative moves, panel sessions, or federal contracting notices that directly impacted equity values. It did not happen once, nor twice, but 47 separate times. He placed the paper down. The mathematical likelihood of 47 synchronistic timing links over a 5-year span, according to our analytical financial division, rests at 1 out of 3.2 million. He glanced toward the panel. For perspective, the probability of getting hit by lightning during a specific year sits at 1 out of 1,722,000. You are significantly more prone to getting hit by a thunderbolt twice than to execute 47 synchronistic equity investments that flawlessly match your partner's legislative itinerary. And contrary to a thunderbolt, these investments consistently move toward a lucrative outcome. He pivoted to the representative. When questioned regarding these transactions, Representative Pelosi has repeatedly declared, "I possess no equities, as my spouse executes those choices, and I do not instruct him to acquire or divest any equity." That could be accurate, yet within the Bureau, when investigating economic offenses, we do not merely examine whoever executed the transaction. We examine whoever possessed the intel, including the individual who managed the legislative itinerary, who determined when the semiconductor legislation would face a decision, who attended secure meetings regarding innovation and national defense, and who understood exactly which enterprises were primed to obtain $280 billion in government funding. That individual consumed meals alongside the individual executing the investments. He took a breath. We do not have to demonstrate she phoned her spouse and stated, "Purchase NVIDIA." We merely have to demonstrate that the intel moved from one edge of the dining table to the opposite side. Within economic statutes, that is labeled an insider trading connection, and 47 links at 1 out of 3. 2 million probability is exactly what attorneys label a trend, moving from $20 million in overall value upon becoming Speaker in 2007 to an approximated $240 million currently. a $174,000 compensation yielding $240 million. That represents a 1,200% gain on a federal salary. Warren Buffett maintained 20% yearly across 60 years and is recognized as the premier financier in recorded time. You maintained substantially greater returns with substantially reduced clarity. The representative's back stiffened. It was not out of certainty or self-protection. It was the spinal reaction of a female whose attorneys had advised her prior to the session to remain upright and remain quiet. Her jaw tightened, imperceptible to the audience, yet noticeable to the second camera, which was positioned to capture the testifier's desk from the side. Her gaze shifted, bypassing Patel, bypassing the panel, and settling onto the defense desk, specifically upon the lawyer from Williams and Connolly. The look endured for a single moment. The look communicated, "Is this what we readied ourselves to face?" The lawyer's expression communicated nothing in return. Penal defense attorneys are conditioned to maintain expressions that communicate absolutely nothing. That is the profession. Point number 2, identical rhythm, identical monotonous delivery. Salvaged correspondence tracking data. Origin, Legislative Security Chief Network Archive. Time frame January 3rd to January 7th, 2021. The session chamber climate cooled, not in a literal sense. The climate control in Dirksen fails to react to statements, yet the individuals certainly reacted. From January 3rd to January 7th, every person inside the chamber recognized what occurred on January 6th. Our digital analytical squad salvaged tracking data, not the messages themselves, but the records indicating the moment's messages were transmitted, acquired, accessed, and erased from the profile of the former security chief, Paul Irving. After Irving obtained his assignment from the House Speaker, his reporting structure went directly through the Speaker's administration. He recited from the sheet. 3 messages were dispatched from Security Chief Irving to the Speaker's primary advisor between January 3rd and January 5th, 2021. Every single one included the term guard within the topic line. Every single one was accessed. The tracking data verifies accessed stamps, and every single one was erased from Irving's profile on January 7th, 2021. He glanced upward. January 7th was the day following the intrusion. 3 messages regarding the federal militia accessed prior to January 6th, erased following January 6th, lacking preservation, lacking forwarding to any protective oversight entity, failing to be saved for any review, simply erased. He placed the paper down. Metropolitan Police Commander Stephen Sund has declared that he asked for federal militia mobilization prior to January 6th. The security chief, your designated official representative, rejected that appeal. The declared justification, based on numerous insiders, was public perception. The visual perception of federal militia forces stationed at the legislature was considered improper. Patel glanced at the Speaker, and subsequently on January 6th, when the facility was compromised and Commander Sund asked for the militia once more, it required more than 60 minutes for authorization because the appeal needed to move up an authorization ladder that featured your administration. He stopped briefly, and later, on recording within video captured by your child, Alexandra, for an exclusive television project, you stated, and I cite, "I assume accountability for failing to have them adequately readied for additional unrest." You additionally stated, "Why were the federal militia absent from the start?" He allowed the statements to linger. 2 statements, both confessions, both recorded, both hidden. That video remains. We realize it remains since Chairman Loudermilk secured it straight from the television network, rather than from your panel, nor from the repository, but from the network. This is because the panel you established to review January 6th, the panel that questioned more than 1,000 individuals, that hosted nationally broadcast sessions, that utilized $20 million of public funds, that recommended a past chief executive for criminal charges. That specific panel possessed this video of you confessing accountability regarding the protective breakdown, and they failed to publish it, failed to incorporate it within their public summary, and failed to save it for the chronological record. You assumed accountability behind closed doors and rejected it publicly. You formed a panel to hold another individual liable for a protective breakdown you confessed on your child's recording belonged to you. The panel hid the video, and the messages regarding the militia were erased the day following the intrusion. He glanced toward the panel. Within the Bureau, we possess a phrase describing this trend. Whenever a target provides a confession in a certain setting and rejects it within an alternative setting, whenever they eliminate correspondence and hide proof concerning their individual declarations, we label it an awareness of culpability. It is not a judicial verdict. It represents an analytical signal. It rests on page 114 inside the Bureau's Psychological Assessment Guide. I realize this because I reviewed it prior to this session. The representative's hand shifted gradually and purposefully. They glided off the desk exterior into her lap, beneath the desk boundary and beneath the lenses. Whenever a testifier's hands vanish beneath the desk during a legislative session, it signifies a single concept. The testifier has ceased attempting to display calmness and has commenced attempting to endure. Hands resting on the desk communicate, I am receptive. Hands resting in the lap communicate, I am gripping tightly. Her lawyer tilted toward her and murmured, a single term, perhaps two. The representative shook her head, a solitary, abrupt, tiny shake. The movement of a female who had been instructed do not reply, and who, for the initial occasion across 37 years, was battling the urge to ignore her attorney. The urge triumphed in every struggle across 37 years. This instance, the urge encountered the facts, and the facts were more substantial. She failed to reply. Point number 3. Patel flipped the sheet. Bureau Economic Web Tracking. Target Pelosi Household Economic Links. Time frame spanning 2007 until currently. He glanced toward the panel. This document remains introductory. Our analytical bookkeepers continue plotting the entire web, yet I can disclose what we have validated thus far. Paul Pelosi runs Financial Leasing Services, a San Francisco-centered investment and property enterprise. The enterprise's funding action, which produces the household's primary revenue, has crossed paths during a minimum of 3 instances with organizations that obtained federal funding from panels that Representative Pelosi led or managed as Speaker. He recited meticulously every term selected in the manner a demolition expert decides the exact cable to sever. During those 3 instances, organizations that provided political committee donations to panels connected to the Pelosi political machinery subsequently obtained specific funding or beneficial panel handling. We are not asserting a direct exchange of favors. We are observing a trend that our analytical bookkeepers have highlighted for additional examination. He glanced at the speaker. You labeled me a partisan agent wearing a police disguise. Allow me to explain what a police expert performs. Representative, he tracks the currency. I have tracked currency across extremist webs within the Middle East. I have tracked currency across drug syndicates within South Florida back when I served as a state defender, studying how the opposition constructs cases. I tracked currency across espionage agency allocations while serving on the House Intelligence Committee. He took a breath. And currently I am tracking currency across the nation's capital. The pathways remain distinct. The front corporations possess superior branding. The attorneys charge higher fees. However, the trend remains identical. Currency travels toward influence, and influence shields the travel. The representative vocalized for the initial occasion following her introductory declaration, the initial term she had spoken over 12 minutes. Her tone was forceful. It was not the measured forcefulness of a legislative address, but the responsive forcefulness of an individual whose quietness had been containing something under pressure. Mr. Director, are you alleging I committed? The phrase halted. It was not because Patel broke in. It was not because the leader yielded, but because the speaker recognized the term that was approaching, the term developing within her vocal cords, the term her tongue was molding. The term that would finalize the phrase was corruption. And voicing corruption through her individual tone for the archive into an audio device on national television would place the term inside her mouth rather than Patel's mouth, but hers entirely. And the footage would state, Nancy Pelosi voices corruption during bureau session. and the footage would loop indefinitely. She halted midway through the sound. The nucleus perished within her vocal cords, similar to an automobile motor shutting off. Her jaw shut, yet everyone inside the chamber perceived the form of the term that failed to emerge. The phantom of corruption hovered between the testifier's desk and the chief's seat, apparent exclusively within the quietness where it ought to have resided. Patel failed to respond, failed to recognize the halted phrase, and failed to grin. He simply flipped the sheet. Point number 4, surveillance camera video. Origin, E-Salon, San Francisco, California. Date September 1st, 2020. He did not have to clarify. Everyone inside the chamber recognized the video. Nancy Pelosi strolling inside a San Francisco beauty parlor lacking a facial covering, breaching the municipality's pandemic quarantine mandates. She had openly backed mandates that had shuttered every beauty parlor inside the municipality, mandates that had ruined independent merchants by the thousands. The video represents an open archive. It has been viewed. What fails to be viewed is what occurred to the female who published it. Patel placed the evidence document away. For the initial occasion, his tone altered, not more affectionate, not gentler, but targeted. He was speaking directly to the lenses currently, addressing the public at their residences, addressing the individuals who remained unaware of what occurred to Erica Cayuse. Erica Cayuse possessed E-Salon, an independent merchant, her personal enterprise. She grew it over 12 years, beginning as a solitary seat inside a communal area, expanding it into a complete parlor featuring 6 beauty experts and a consumer directory that required a decade to compile. When the pandemic struck, she obeyed the regulations, shut her entryways, requested paycheck assistance loans, waited, observed her funds deplete while her property owner refused to wait, and completed everything the administration instructed her to perform. Subsequently, on September 1st, 2020, Representative Pelosi strolled inside Erica's parlor lacking a facial covering inside a municipality where every alternative parlor remained shuttered due to the quarantine mandates that Representative Pelosi had openly advocated. Erica maintained a surveillance camera. The device captured what it observed, and Erica formulated a choice that every citizen would comprehend. She published the video. He took a breath regarding that choice, for revealing to the nation that the House Speaker failed to obey her individual regulations. Erica Cayuse obtained lethal ultimatums, nameless phone interactions directed at her enterprise, and ultimatums directed at her relatives. She dropped consumers who felt terrified of being connected to her. Inside 6 months, she shuttered E-Salon forever. Inside a single year, she relocated from San Francisco, a 12-year enterprise obliterated since she displayed reality. And Representative Pelosi's reaction was, "I was set up." A brief statement that constituted the justification, not a statement of remorse, not an acknowledgement that she ought to have donned a facial covering, not an acknowledgement that she ought to have obeyed the exact regulations she demanded everyone else obey. The justification was that the female whose parlor I strolled inside without a facial covering deceived me. He flipped a sheet. Yet here remains what no individual published up to this point. The Justice Department evaluated pandemic exemption documents regarding individual grooming establishments inside San Francisco spanning the timeframe of March 2020 to June 2021. 4 parlors, all 4 residing in the identical postal region as E-Salon, obtained local exemptions permitting them to function throughout the harshest period of the quarantine. Exemptions that Erica Cayuse failed to obtain. Exemptions that Erica Cayuse remained unaware existed. He recited from the sheet. Regarding the 4 parlors that obtained exemptions, every single one was possessed by persons who had provided funding to progressive political groups inside San Francisco County during the previous 3 years. Funding totals spanned from $2,500 up to $15,000. Erica Cayuse had provided 0 political funding. The parlor that displayed reality was shuttered. The parlors that remained silent remained functioning. The distinction regarding functioning and shuttered was not obedience. It represented funding. Back when I operated as a state defender inside Miami-Dade County, I defended individuals the judiciary had previously found guilty within its thoughts prior to the proceeding commencing. narcotic distributors, killers, and syndicate participants. I protected them because the Sixth Amendment declares every individual deserves an attorney, and the 14th Amendment declares every individual deserves equitable defense beneath the statutes. Every individual, not merely every funder, not merely every companion, not merely every individual who remains silent while the influential violate the regulations. Every individual, he glanced at the speaker. The issue has never been whether you secure a defense, representative, you possess Williams and Connolly, you possess assets, you possess alternatives. The issue revolves around whether the regulations you force upon everyone else relate to you. Erica Kios obeyed your regulations and forfeited her enterprise. You violated your regulations and received a styling appointment, and the machinery you command compensated the parlors that contributed and penalized the parlor that revealed reality. Across the session chamber screens, the parlor video broadcasted, not the entire segment, but a brief snippet showing her strolling inside the parlor without a face covering, the surveillance lens capturing her from an elevated angle, the timestamp in the corner displaying September 1st, 2020. The representative viewed herself across the display, her mouth pressed into a narrow streak, lacking the political grin, lacking the combat expression, lacking the strategic quietness. A streak, the narrowest conceivable arrangement of human mouths, the arrangement that communicates I am gripping my expression intact, utilizing my jaw muscles because everything else is attempting to crumble. Her eyes failed to blink for 8 seconds. The network would subsequently verify the length because someone continuously measures. Her gaze remained wide, locked upon the screen, viewing herself stroll inside a parlor that no longer functioned, possessed by a female who no longer resided in the municipality, throughout a global illness that had shuttered every alternative enterprise along the street. 8 seconds without blinking constitutes a lengthy duration, plentiful time for moisture to accumulate. Not emotional weeping, but biological moisture, the variety the system generates when the protective skin flaps decline to perform their duty. The liquid pooled at the edges of her gaze, and regardless if it represented physiology or culpability or the illumination inside Dirksen Room 226, it appeared on screen like the start of weeping. She blinked eventually, and the liquid vanished, carrying away the ultimate observable proof of anything mimicking a human response. Point number 5. Patel's tone reverted to the artifact inventory rhythm, chilly and administrative, the tone of a male reciting the concluding entry of a manifest prior to locking the artifact vault, the ultimate item, the singular one possessing the greatest importance. He glanced toward the panel. Whenever the January 6th Select Panel disbanded during the conclusion of the 117th Congress, panel personnel were directed to hand over all documentation to the National Archives, standard protocol. Every panel performs this at the conclusion of a legislative session. The documents transition into a portion of the enduring historical register. He flipped the sheet. A bureau assessment of the handover, executed upon the demand of Chairman Loudermilk's oversight subpanel, discovered that the handover remained partial. 14 cartons of physical records alongside roughly 40 gigabytes of electronic data were omitted from the National Archives handover. He permitted the figure to linger. 14 cartons and 40 gigabytes, lacking redaction, lacking classification, lacking retention for national defense, simply absent. As though an individual had determined that specific records from a $20 million two-year inquiry failed to require retention. He glanced at the speaker. We retrieved a segment of those files via redundancy networks managed by the House Information Resources Office. The retrieved data features internal personnel communications, discussion records that were hidden from the public, and messages exchanged between the panel and the Speaker's administration regarding testifier choices and factual presentation tactics. He shut the portfolio, placed it to the side, and clasped his hands. The substance of those messages rests presently beneath Justice Department examination. I am unable to detail specifics within a public session, yet I can guarantee you this. A panel established to examine the occurrences of January 6th failed to retain all of its individual proof regarding January 6th. 14 cartons and 40 gigabytes are absent from the repository. And the individual who established that panel, who chose its participants, who outlined its boundaries, who directed its finances, rests currently at this testifier desk. He glanced at the speaker. You utilized $20 million examining January 6th, and whenever the inquiry concluded, 14 cartons of proof vanished. Within the Bureau, whenever proof vanishes following an inquiry, we fail to label it a filing mistake. We label it evidence destruction. He took a breath. Speaker Johnson educated the nation regarding that term the previous week. I intend to utilize it presently. The representative failed to shift, failed to speak, failed to blink, failed to adjust her spectacles, failed to glance at her attorney, and failed to glance at the panel. She failed to execute any of the actions that Nancy Pelosi had executed across 37 years of sessions, legislative clashes, media briefings, and legislative combat. She rested motionlessly, demonstrating the quietness of a machinery that had operated for 37 years and had abruptly, lacking warning, lacking formality, turned off. It was not the quietness of an individual deciding not to talk, but the quietness of an apparatus that had suffered disconnection, where the energy signal, the specific one that had remained active since 1987, spanning 2 speaker terms, 4 executive administrations, 2 removal trials, a global illness, and a rebellion, had extinguished, and the chamber could observe it. And the chamber comprehended that what they were observing was not a hesitation, it represented a conclusion. Her lawyer tilted toward her and murmured. The speaker failed to shake her head during this instance, failed to nod, and failed to respond. The lawyer settled back, and for the initial occasion during the session, for the initial occasion perhaps during their vocational association, the attorney possessed 0 additional guidance to offer, and the patron possessed 0 additional determination to dismiss it. Patel rose, reached into the interior compartment of his coat, and extracted his bureau identification, the leather holder featuring the shield and portrait that every chief possesses, the identification that had been possessed by Mueller and Comey and Wray and McCabe, and every chief stretching backward to J. Edgar Hoover. He elevated the shield, lacking theatricality, strictly functional, the manner a professional elevates identification at an entryway prior to executing a court order. Representative Pelosi. You stated this shield, Robert Mueller's shield, James Comey's shield is owned by experts. You remain correct. This shield embodies every investigator who has ever possessed it. Every inquiry, every strike, every early morning court order executed upon a freezing porch, every assignment constructed piece by piece upon proof, rather than ideology, rather than storytelling, rather than broadcasting. Proof. He placed the shield upon the desk. Carefully, the manner you place down an object possessing significance. You labeled me a partisan agent wearing a police disguise. Allow me to explain what this disguise has discovered during the 5 months I have sported it. He counted, utilizing his digits. 47 connected equity investments alongside a 1 out of 3. 2 million likelihood of random chance. 3 erased messages concerning the federal militia, erased the day following the intrusion. A family economic web that our analytical bookkeepers continue plotting. A parlor proprietor who forfeited everything for revealing reality while 4 of her rivals who funded your associates maintained their entryways open, and 14 cartons of proof originating from a $20 million inquiry that no individual can locate. He glanced at the speaker. You labeled me a flatterer and stated I answer to a monarch. I answer to no monarch, Representative. I answer to this shield, and this shield answers to the Constitution. The exact Constitution you pledged to protect and subsequently utilized for 37 years as a tool, striking everyone excluding yourself. He paused for 10 seconds. The session chamber measured them in the manner session chambers continuously measure silences, utilizing pulses rather than seconds. I am not Mueller, I am not Comey, I am not Wray. I am the individual you attempted to block from examining you during 2017. Whenever I operated for the House Intelligence Committee and we exposed Bureau misconduct during Crossfire Hurricane, you alongside your associates labeled me a paranoia promoter. You attempted to undermine the Nunes report. You attempted to hide the inquiry. You attempted to hide me. He retrieved the shield and returned it to his compartment. I remain present, and so remain the facts. He glanced at the representative of final instance, establishing direct visual contact. The gap separating the dual testifier desks measured 4 feet, and those 4 feet encapsulated 37 years of authority alongside 5 months of endurance, plus 5 documents that were supposed to be eliminated yet survived. Rest peacefully, Representative. He took a seat. The session chamber remained motionless. The lawmakers remained motionless. The audience remained motionless. And the lawyer from Williams and Connolly remained motionless. And Nancy Pelosi, the most influential woman within American legislative history, the female who had managed the House of Representatives in the manner a commander manages an operation, the female whose tone had molded statutes, obliterated professions, and constructed empires, rested at the testifier desk with her hands resting in her lap, her mouth shut, and her gaze directed ahead, exhibiting the stance of an individual who had devoted 37 years managing every chamber she accessed, yet had merely accessed a chamber managed by another individual. The mallet descended and the session concluded. And the noise of the mallet, a solitary impact, pure and absolute, traveled across Dirksen Room 226 in the manner proof travels across an inquiry, systematically, thoroughly, and without seeking consent. The video that exploded was not Rest Peacefully, Representative, even though that transitioned into the second highest viewed legislative video of 2025, trailing exclusively the Kennedy angling competition parallel. The video represented the nucleus, a trio of characters, the start of a term the speaker failed to finalize, the phantom sound, 12 seconds of video featuring Patel reciting point number 3, and the speaker exploding with "Mr. Director, are you alleging I committed and subsequently the halt, the partial sound expiration, the jaw sealing over corruption like a snare sealing over a digit, 39 million views inside 48 hours, not since it was sensational, but since it was uncontrolled. The speaker had not intended to vocalize corruption. The term had surfaced from a location beneath tactics, beneath readiness, beneath the 37 years of communication control, originating from the territory where the anatomy comprehends what the intellect refuses to acknowledge. And her jaw had commenced molding it prior to her intellect catching up. The nucleus broke free, the remainder was choked back, and 39 million citizens observed a female subconscious double-cross her on national television. A physical posture specialist on the news network, invited to evaluate the video, stated the halted term is substantially more exposing than any complete phrase she has ever uttered. Whenever an individual commences a term involuntarily and halts it voluntarily, it indicates the conscious intellect is catching up to what the unconscious intellect already recognizes. She recognizes the term fits, she simply lacks the luxury to utter it. The conservative network broadcasted the video 31 times inside 24 hours. The progressive network broadcasted it 4 times, every instance accompanied by a group struggling to justify why it failed to signify what it clearly signified. The groups lacked persuasion, the sound remained definitive. 1 out of 3.2 million transitioned into an internet phenomenon. Not the legislative variety, but the mathematical variety. The financial sphere transformed it into a metric of calculation. Every occasion a lawmaker executed a questionably timed transaction, the remarks overflowed with inquiries regarding the probability. 1 out of 3.2 million, a financial technology enterprise constructed a web tool that highlighted legislative equity transactions executing within 14 days of associated legislation. They named it the Pelosi indicator. It secured 2 million acquisitions inside its initial month. The tool's graphic represented a tiny lightning flash, an allusion to Patel's highly likely to get hit by a thunderbolt twice parallel. Inside 3 months, the tool had highlighted 23 transactions executed by 11 lawmakers from both factions. The instrument Patel had directed at the speaker was currently directed at everyone, and everyone felt anxious. The Erica Keogh segment produced a reaction the alternative elements failed to produce. Compassion funding. Inside 72 hours, a crowdfunding campaign backing Keogh's judicial reserve collected $890,000, exceeding the worth of the enterprise she had forfeited. The remarks remained uniform. You displayed reality. The machinery penalized you, we recall. Traditional conservative outlets broadcasted features. A production crew hailing from the Daily Wire revealed a brief documentary. And the issue that continuously surfaced inside remarks, inside posts, and inside editorials represented Patel's issue, phrased differently but holding the identical meaning. For what reason did the parlors that provided funding obtain exemptions, while the parlor that revealed reality suffered closure? 14 cartons transitioned into the central puzzle. Not since cartons appear sensational, as cartons seldom are. Because the lack of cartons remains sensational, a $20 million inquiry produces thousands of documents. Those documents occupied scores of cartons, and 14 among those cartons, alongside 40 gigabytes of electronic data, failed to reside where the statute commands they ought to be. No individual had clarified the reason, no individual had clarified the method. And the Justice Department was currently demanding 6 former personnel members, under the threat of penalty, to explain. The Regulatory Commission launched an official evaluation of financial leasing services, bypassing Paul Pelosi directly. The marital loophole preserved its technical standing, yet the enterprise's transaction framework, intelligence channels, and choice execution methodology faced scrutiny. The 1 out of 3.2 million figure transitioned into the core element of the Commission's referral. 3 conservative lawmakers alongside 1 unaffiliated representative jointly signed a document labeling the likelihood of mathematical absurdity demanding official inquiry rather than casual evaluation. The Commission allocated the inquiry to its Trading Misconduct Division, the exact division that had charged Martha Stewart. The allocation represented a message. Martha Stewart headed to a penitentiary for deceiving regarding a $45,000 equity transaction. The representative's family's connected transactions amounted to tens of millions. Lawmaker Rick Scott's auditing demand, submitted in August 2025 and existing upon the Open Archive, transitioned into a thorough investigation regarding the family's investment behavior across her complete 37-year legislative tenure. It covered not merely the 47 transactions Patel highlighted, but every transaction, every panel placement, and every fragment of legislation that impacted a corporation the family possessed equity inside. The magnitude represented the widest economic review ever executed upon an active or past lawmaker. The representative's attorneys submitted a request to restrict the magnitude. The auditing office rejected it. The rejection consisted of 2 statements. The magnitude mirrors the length of the target's tenure. 37 years of tenure necessitates 37 years of evaluation. The Justice Department distributed legal demands to 6 former January 6th Select Panel personnel members concerning the 14 absent cartons. Former leader Benny Thompson's administration hired Williams and Connolly, the exact practice defending the Speaker, thereby generating an instant ethical dilemma inquiry that neither patron wished to address openly. Thompson distributed a single-statement declaration stating he remained certain that all documents experienced appropriate handling. The Bureau's manifest, asserting 14 cartons and 40 gigabytes, disputed that claim. Former Deputy Leader Liz Cheney distributed her personal declaration. I support the panel's efforts and its document retention. She failed to clarify the omission. A pair of former personnel members communicating via attorneys signaled readiness to collaborate. A quartet failed to answer. Erica Keogh submitted a citizen complaint against the municipality and county of San Francisco within the Northern District of California. The grievance referenced the Justice Department review demonstrating preferential application of pandemic quarantine mandates for funding parlors that secured functioning exemptions. Keogh's lacked an exemption. The grievance claimed a breach regarding the equal protection segment of the 14th Amendment, alongside First Amendment retribution. The video publication represented protected communication plus deliberate delivery of psychological damage. Restitutions demanded totaled $2.4 million, encompassing the calculated worth of her 12-year enterprise, moving expenses, forfeited revenue, and validated psychological trauma. A traditionalist legal charity assumed the dispute without charging fees. The municipality of San Francisco's initial reply, submitted by the municipal lawyer, contained 7 words. The municipality rejects all assertions of misconduct, 7 words to respond to a 12-year enterprise obliterated. The imbalance represented the central theme. The House Ethics Committee obtained an official referral, jointly signed by 4 conservatives and 1 unaffiliated representative, demanding a review exploring whether the Speaker's administration commanded or aided the extraction of January 6 panel documents from the National Archives handover. The referral explicitly referenced the trio of erased security chief messages featuring the term guard within the topic line, the 14 absent cartons, the hidden television video, and the trend of document handling that Patel had characterized as an awareness of culpability. The representative's representative labeled the referral a partisan-driven wild goose chase meant to divert attention away from the genuine dangers confronting our republic. Patel's administration answered utilizing 4 words: "We welcome an inquiry. Thank you." The Regulatory Commission's Trading Misconduct Division demanded and acquired Paul Pelosi's complete transaction documents from his trading firm, encompassing execution timestamps, correspondence histories bridging the trading firm and the patron, plus network addresses originating the transactions. The demand remained typical regarding insider trading reviews, yet its deployment directed at a former speaker's spouse stood unparalleled. Paul Pelosi's lawyer labeled the demand an overstep fueled by partisan drama. The commission's reply referenced 1 out of 3, $2 million, and highlighted that mathematical absurdity of this scale represents adequate foundation for a complete analytical review under Section 10B of the Securities Exchange Act. Judicial commentators highlighted that Section 10B represents the exact regulation utilized to charge Bernie Madoff. The representative's 2026 election effort, she would turn 86 years old, encountered its initial severe primary rival during 2 decades. The rival, a 38-year-old San Francisco municipal official named David Chen, kicked off featuring a campaign motto requiring 0 explanation. 14 cartons. Inside a week, the effort had collected $1.2 million via modest currency contributions. An amusing figure considering that $2 million likewise represented the total Karen Waters had secured for distributing flyers during the Kennedy session. The web observed the overlap. Each collected $1.2 million. A viral post noted, one directed at an effort, the alternative directed at postage administration. Chen's campaign destination contained a singular page, an active timer tracking the deadline the Justice Department legal demand answers became due originating from former panel personnel. It featured 0 administrative stances and 0 recommendations, strictly a timer. The timer represented the effort, and the timer kept advancing. The National Committee failed to openly revoke backing directed at the representative. That action would have appeared excessively noticeable, excessively definitive, and excessively resembling a confession. Alternatively, the Legislative Campaign Committee covertly shifted $400,000 in faction resources, originating from California's 11th district to a trio of contested battleground districts. The shift remained hidden inside a seasonal document that no individual was meant to review. A journalist operating for Politico reviewed it. The headline declared, "Progressives covertly defunding the representative's territory." The Speaker's administration labeled the Shift Standard Resource Administration. The trio of battleground districts acquiring the currency labeled it appreciated. The lecture circuit, the former Speaker's post-leadership revenue stream, the $100,000 per engagement circuit that had transformed her into a staple across corporate symposiums and college graduations, shrank to almost 0. Not because associations ceased contacting, but because associations' legal divisions began evaluating the Regulatory Commission inquiry and recommending against affiliation, public image hazard, the trio of words that obliterate more vocations than formal charges. A trio of colleges canceled the Speaker acting as graduation lecturer. A pair of business councils she served upon as a consultant covertly excised her from their digital networks. The excision lacked an announcement. The location simply vanished. Similar to 14 cartons originating from a repository. Williams and Connolly invoiced $2.1 million during the initial 4 months covering penal protection, Regulatory Commission answers, Justice Department legal demand adherence, auditing office review collaboration, ethics panel referral answers, and Keogh's litigation observation. $2.1 million in attorney charges directed at a female valued at $240 million. The charges remained bearable. What remained unbearable was the reality that the charges occurred. Nancy Pelosi had never required a penal defense lawyer previously across 37 years. And currently, she possessed a $2.1 million invoice alongside the practice that defends individuals who anticipate facing formal charges. The Williams and Connolly invoice represented the giveaway. Inside the Capitol, you decline to hire Williams and Connolly regarding vehicle fines. You secure them whenever the incinerator fails to function. You recently witnessed the federal law enforcement chief recite 5 segments of salvaged proof to the most influential female within American legislative history. Proof she assumed remained eliminated. Messages she assumed remained erased. Video she assumed remained hidden. Documents she assumed remained absent. They ceased being absent. They experienced retrieval. Yet here represents what they wish to keep you from understanding. The inquiry remains active. It is commencing. Number 1, the Regulatory Commission remains evaluating 47 equity transactions synchronized alongside legislative moves. 1 out of 3.2 million probability of random chance. The transactions stand open. The inquiry stands currently official. Lawmaker Rick Scott's auditing office review encompasses her complete career, every transaction, every panel, every choice. Number 2, 14 cartons of panel documents failed to experience proper preservation. The Bureau salvaged a portion via redundancy networks. The Justice Department has demanded testimony from 6 former personnel members. No individual has clarified the destination of the cartons or the identity of the person who extracted them. Number 3, Erica Cayuse, the parlor proprietor who displayed the nation reality concerning pandemic hypocrisy, forfeited her enterprise, obtained lethal ultimatums, and relocated from her municipality. She has never obtained an expression of regret. She has never obtained restitution. The Justice Department discovered that 4 of her rivals, all being progressive funders, obtained pandemic exemptions that she lacked. She has initiated a legal action. The litigation remains active. 3 inquiries, all active, all progressing, all requiring a singular element: individuals who decline to overlook. Nancy Pelosi has endured 37 years inside the Capitol because proof vanishes. That represents the method the Capitol operates. Documents enter incinerators. Incinerators enter furnaces, and the remains fail to provide testimony. Yet this instance, the individual managing the Bureau happens to be the individual she attempted to incinerate during 2017, the individual she labeled a paranoia promoter, the individual whose inquiry she attempted to hide. He remains present, and so remain the facts. Register, distribute this alongside a single individual who currently assumes legislative equity transactions represent random chance, and inquire what 1 out of 3.2 million signifies. Place incinerator inside the remarks if you believe 14 absent cartons originating from a $20 million inquiry merit a clarification. And strike that notification icon, because whenever the Justice Department concludes evaluating those files, you will wish to understand what resides inside. The incinerator stands ajar. The remains are communicating.